Welcome back, everyone. Get ready, because today we're diving deep into a topic that's both ancient and surprisingly relevant to today's world. We're talking about the art of war, but not just about battles and armies.
Yeah, we're going way beyond the battlefield today.
Exactly. We're going to explore how this ancient Chinese text by Sun Tzu has wisdom that applies to, well, pretty much any competitive situation you can think of.
Business, leadership, even just personal growth, you name it. It's incredible how principles from over 2,500 years ago can still be so insightful.
Right. And to help us unpack all this, we've got some really fascinating excerpts from a contemporary Chinese interpretation of the art of war.
And what's cool about this interpretation is that it looks at Sun Tzu's ideas through the lens of modern business and management.
So it's like taking this ancient wisdom and seeing how it plays out in today's world. That's our mission for this deep dive.
Hey, believe me, there's a lot to unpack. Sun Tzu was a brilliant strategist.
Oh, absolutely. But where do we even begin with a text as complex and layered as the art of war? It can feel a bit daunting, to be honest.
Well, the source material we have actually gives us a great starting point. It highlights what Sun Tzu called the 5 fundamental factors, or mu in Chinese. These are Dao, Tian, Di, Jiang, and Fa. And get this, it even calls these factors the first ever strategic management model.
Wow, the first ever. That's a pretty bold claim.
It is, but when you break down these factors, it's amazing how much sense they make, even in a modern context.
Okay, I'm really intrigued now. Let's break it down then. Let's start with Dao. What's that all about?
Tao is all about understanding the why. It's like the deeper purpose behind what you're doing. Think of it as your compass. In a modern business sense, this translates to having a really strong mission statement and a clear set of values.
So it's not just about setting goals, but also knowing why you're setting those goals.
Exactly. And the source material really hammers home how important this is. Without a clear sense of Tao, a company or even an individual can get lost. They might make decisions that end up conflicting with what they truly believe in.
It's like you said, losing your compass. You need that guiding principle. Okay, that makes sense. What about the next factor, Tian?
Tian is all about timing. It's the when of taking action. Sun Tzu was big on recognizing and seizing the right opportunity at the right time.
So like the saying goes, timing is everything.
Precisely. You could have the best product or idea in the world, but if you launch at the wrong time, it could flop. And on the flip side, a mediocre idea launched at the perfect moment could be a huge hit.
That's so true, though figuring out that perfect moment is the tricky part, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you even determine that? Is it intuition? Data analysis?
Well, Sun Tzu was all about keen observation, understanding historical trends and cycles. He said that those who master Tian can see the patterns, almost like they have a sixth sense.
Almost like anticipating the shifts in the landscape before they happen.
Exactly. It's about being deeply in tune with your surroundings.
Okay, so we've got Dado, the why, and Tian, the when. What's next?
Correct. You got it. D's all about understanding the where. And in Sun Tzu's military context, this meant the terrain of the battlefield.
So in a business context, would that be like understanding the market you're in, doing
Yeah.
your market research and all that?
Exactly. It's about knowing the competitive landscape inside and out. Who are your competitors? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Where do you have an advantage?
It's like a general scouting out the battlefield before sending troops in.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu stresses that you got to choose your battles wisely, knowing when to advance, when to hold back, and where you're most likely to succeed.
This reminds me of those startups that focus on a really niche market first, kind of establishing a base before going after the bigger players.
Perfect example. It's about recognizing where you have an edge based on the specific terrain, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, we've covered Dao, Tian, and Di. On to Jiang. This one's a big one.
Jiang the who, I'm guessing this is all about leadership.
You nailed it. Jiang is about having strong, capable leaders. Leaders who can inspire, make tough decisions, and see the big picture.
Something that's timeless, right? Strong leadership is always important.
Always. And the source material points out how vital this is. Sun Tzu outlines 5 specific qualities of a great leader, and it's interesting because they go beyond just being good at strategy.
Oh. So what are those qualities?
Well, there's wisdom, obviously, but then there's sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. It's a really interesting mix.
So it's not just about being smart, but also having a strong moral compass and the ability to inspire trust.
Exactly. The source materials talks about how the best leaders instill discipline and boost morale in their teams. That's how you know they're effective.
It's like that saying, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses.
Exactly. A great leader can make all the difference. Okay, we're down to the last of the 5 factors, Phi.
Phi, the how, right?
Yeah, you got it. Phi is all about the organization, systems, and processes that make a group function smoothly. Think of it as the glue that holds everything together.
It's interesting because I feel like this aspect is sometimes overlooked, especially in the startup world where everyone's focused on moving fast and breaking things.
That's true, and the source material points out how even successful companies can stumble if they don't have solid systems in place. It's like having a powerful engine but no chassis to contain it.
Okay, I get it. You can have great ideas and talented people, but without a well-structured organization, it can all fall apart.
Exactly.
Oh.
Right, so to sum up these 5 factors, it seems like you can't just focus on one or two. They're all connected.
Yeah, that's what I'm gathering too.
The source material makes that point as well. It says that, for example, having a clear purpose, your Tao, can actually help you figure out the best timing, your Tian, for taking action. Or having a well-structured organization, your Pian, can make your leadership, your Jian, much more effective.
It's like they all feed into each other, creating a sort of feedback loop.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow, this is giving me a lot to think about. And to think, we're just getting started with Sun Tzu.
Oh, there's so much more to explore. Like how Sun Tzu viewed competition and his ideas about achieving victory without even fighting.
Okay, now that's something I really want to hear more about. It sounds almost paradoxical.
It is, and that's what makes Sun Tzu so fascinating. He was thinking way outside the box, even back then.
Well, I'm hooked. Let's dive into those ideas next.
You know, building on that whole idea of interconnectedness that we were just talking about, let's move on to another key framework that Sun Tzu outlines. He calls it the 7 comparisons.
7 comparisons.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and it's essentially a way to analyze your strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
but not just in isolation. You have to compare them to your competition.
Oh, interesting. So it's not enough to just know what you're good at. You need to see how you stack up against the others.
Exactly. It's like a precursor to the SWOT analysis that's so popular in business today.
Makes sense. Okay, so 7 comparisons. That's a lot to cover. Where do we even begin?
Well, the source material we have actually focuses on 2 of these comparisons, which I think are super relevant.
Okay, which 2?
The first one is which ruler is more righteous, and the second is which general is more capable.
Okay, at first glance, those seem pretty straightforward. Like, are you a good leader or not?
Right. It seems that way, but there's actually a lot of depth there, and they both tie back into those 5 factors we were discussing earlier.
Right, the Tao, Tian, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with that first comparison, which ruler is more righteous? This gets into the heart of leadership qualities.
That Jiang factor.
Exactly. Sun Tzu knew that a leader's vision, their values, their ability to inspire, those things are crucial for long-term success.
I mean, that makes sense. If you're just a capable leader, but you're using your skills for the wrong reasons, for selfish reasons, it's not going to end well.
Right, and the source material illustrates this with a fascinating comparison between 2 historical figures from ancient China,
Okay, who are we talking about?
Liu Bang and Yingbu. Now, Liu Bang, he prioritized the greater good, the well-being of the people he led. He ultimately triumphed. Yingbu, on the other hand, was more focused on personal gain, on grabbing power. And guess what? He ended up meeting his downfall.
It's like that saying, the bigger the ego, the harder the fall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't just about being capable. It's about leading with integrity and having a vision that resonates with your followers.
Okay, that's which ruler is more righteous. What about the second comparison? Which general is more capable? That one seems a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, but it still goes beyond just having skills or resources. Sun Tzu is really emphasizing strategic brilliance here, the ability to make sound judgments under pressure and to adapt to changing circumstances.
So it's about having a cool head and being able to think on your feet?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the source material emphasizes how, even if you have superior resources, if you have an incompetent leader, you're likely to fail.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Having a great army doesn't mean much if the general leading them is clueless.
Right. And they actually give a really compelling example in the source material, the Battle of Trafalgar. Have you heard of that one?
Vaguely. Remind me.
So you've got the British Admiral, Lord Nelson.
Yeah.
He was outnumbered, right? But he was a brilliant strategist. He completely outmaneuvered the combined fleets of France and Spain.
Wow. So even though he had fewer ships, his strategic thinking won the day.
Exactly. That's the power of a truly capable leader.
Okay, so these 2 comparisons, which ruler is more righteous and which general is more capable, they both really highlight how important the human element is in strategy.
It's not just about numbers and resources.
Yeah.
It's about leadership, vision, and inspiring people to follow you.
It makes me think about all those stories of underdog victories. Like, how did they pull that off? It often comes down to having a leader who can inspire and motivate their team to achieve the impossible.
Absolutely. And speaking of achieving the impossible, this leads us to another fascinating aspect of Sun Tzu's philosophy, the idea of achieving victory without direct confrontation.
Now, that's something I've always been curious about. The idea that the most skillful victory is the one achieved before the battle even begins. It almost sounds counterintuitive.
Right. Sun Tzu believed that true mastery lies in subduing the enemy without fighting. He actually said, the highest form of skill is to break the enemy's resistance without fighting.
Wow, so it's like outsmarting your opponent to the point where they just give up.
Exactly. It's about anticipating their moves, disrupting their plans, and essentially making them powerless without having to resort to brute force.
So it's more of a mental game.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But it also involves taking very specific actions. Sun Tzu outlined several ways to achieve this kind of victory. He talks about attacking plans, attacking alliances, and attacking the army.
Okay, I'm really intrigued now. Break those down for me. Starting with attacking plans. What does that even mean?
So, attacking plans is all about disrupting the enemy's strategy through superior planning, intelligence gathering, and even psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare. That sounds intense, like messing with your opponent's minds.
Exactly. Sun Tzu was a big believer in the power of knowledge and deception. If you understand your opponent's intentions and their weaknesses, you can anticipate their moves and basically outmaneuver them mentally.
So it's like playing 4D chess.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
And I think this concept is so relevant in today's business world. Think about how companies are constantly trying to anticipate their competitors' next move and disrupt their plans. It's like a never-ending game of chess, trying to stay one step ahead.
It really is. And that brings us to the next concept, attacking alliances, right? What's that all about?
So attacking alliances is less about direct confrontation and more about skillful maneuvering within an ecosystem.
Ecosystem.
Yeah, think of it as the broader network of relationships and influences within an industry.
Okay, I'm following. So how do you attack those alliances?
It's about forming strategic partnerships that benefit you and, in a way, isolate your competitors. A great example from the source material is actually Microsoft's alliance with AOL back in the early days of the internet.
Oh, yeah, that was a huge deal. I remember that.
So Microsoft saw the potential of the internet, obviously, and they wanted their browser, Internet Explorer, to be dominant.
Makes sense.
So they partnered with AOL, which is a major player at the time, and it gave them a huge advantage over their competitors. It wasn't about directly fighting them. It was about strategically positioning themselves within that growing internet ecosystem.
So it's like playing the long game, building relationships, and creating a web of influence that benefits you.
Exactly. Okay, and lastly, we have attacking the army. This one's a bit more about direct action.
Okay, back to the battlefield.
Kind of, but not necessarily in a literal sense. Attacking the army is about choosing your battles wisely, maximizing your strengths, and exploiting your enemy's weaknesses.
So this ties back to understanding the terrain, the die factor.
Yes, it's about recognizing where you have an advantage and choosing engagements where you're most likely to succeed.
So it's not about being aggressive just for the sake of it. It's about being strategic and knowing when to strike.
Exactly. And sometimes the most strategic move is actually retreat. It might sound counterintuitive, but it allows you to regroup and come back stronger.
Like that saying, he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day.
Oh, yeah, kind of like that. And they actually give a great example in the source material from the Chinese Civil War, the Red Army's Long March.
Oh, I've heard of that, but I don't know much about it.
The Red Army was vastly outnumbered, right? But they kept outmaneuvering the enemy by choosing their battles carefully and using their terrain to their advantage.
So it's almost like using the environment itself as a weapon.
Exactly. That's what Sun Tzu was all about, using everything at your disposal to achieve victory.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. From the 5 factors to these 7 comparisons, and now these ideas about achieving victory without direct confrontation.
And we haven't even gotten to deception yet.
Yeah.
That's a whole other layer of Sun Tzu's thinking.
Oh, right. I almost forgot. I'm really curious about that. It's one of those concepts that can seem a bit ethically ambiguous at first glance.
I know what you mean. But when you understand it in the context of Sun Tzu's philosophy, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Okay, well, let's dive into that next. I'm ready to hear more about how Sun Tzu viewed deception and how it plays into his overall strategy. Okay, let's talk deception. It's one of those things that can feel a bit, well, morally iffy, right?
I get it, yeah. The word deception has some baggage. But the way some cement it is often misinterpreted. It's not about lying or being unethical. It's more about subtly shaping perceptions to your advantage.
So more like a magician using misdirection to pull off a trick.
Exactly. It's about understanding your opponent's psychology and using that to influence their actions. You anticipate their assumptions and then, ever so slightly, nudge the situation in your favor.
The source material was pretty clear that Sun Tzu wasn't advocating for dishonesty or anything like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's about strategy and intelligence, not trickery. Every action you take, every bit of information you share or hold back sends a signal. It's about being aware of that.
Makes me think about negotiations, actually, whether in business or even just personal life.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like being strategic about what you reveal and how you present it. It can totally influence the outcome.
Exactly. Sun Tzu would probably say that good negotiators are masters of deception in that sense.
Yeah.
They know how to frame the conversation, guide their opponent towards a particular decision.
But isn't there a risk to this kind of, I don't know, maneuvering? What if your opponent sees through it?
Well, that's where adaptability comes in. Remember that famous Sun Tzu quote, "Be formless, shapeless, like water."
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
It's all about fluidity, being able to adapt as the situation changes. And that's key for any kind of strategic thinking, especially when it comes to deception. If your plan is too rigid, it's gonna break.
So you got to be ready to adjust on the fly.
Exactly. The source material actually uses a great example to illustrate this. The Red Army's 4 crossings of the Chishiri River during the Long March.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense just from the name.
It was. So they were vastly outnumbered by the enemy. Right. But they were constantly on the move, adapting their plans based on what was happening, outmaneuvering a much larger force.
Wow, talk about agility.
Right. Instead of sticking to a fixed plan, they embraced fluidity. They were like water flowing around obstacles.
This is so relevant, especially in today's world where everything is changing so fast.
Oh, absolutely. Businesses that can't adapt quickly get left behind.
Yeah.
And it's not just organizations either, it's individuals too. We all need to be able to learn, unlearn, relearn as the world changes around us.
Yeah, being adaptable is like a superpower these days.
I'd say so.
Hmm.
So I guess to wrap up our deep dive into Sun Tzu and the art of war,
Yeah.
the main takeaway is that strategy isn't about following a set of rules. It's about having a mindset, a way of thinking that embraces flexibility, adaptability.
And understanding how people think, right? That psychology element.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Sun Tzu's wisdom, it's not just for battlefields. It applies to leadership, decision-making, pretty much any situation where there's competition.
Absolutely. We covered so much today, it's hard to even summarize it all.
I know, right? The 5 factors, the 7 comparisons, indirect attack, deception. It's a lot to process.
But it's so fascinating, isn't it? And I think there's something in here for everyone. I know I'm already thinking about how I can apply these ideas to my own life.
That's the best part. Sun Tzu's work, it's meant to be put into practice. You take these principles, you adapt them to your own unique challenges. That's where the real value lies.
And remember that question we posed earlier? What's one blind spot in your situation where applying Sun Tzu's principles could give you an advantage?
Maybe there's a competitor you haven't taken seriously enough.
Or an opportunity you've overlooked.
It's about seeing the world through a strategic lens.
Always observing, analyzing, adapting.
That's what Sun Tzu teaches us.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the wisdom of Sun Tzu. We hope you learned something, got inspired to think differently about strategy and competition.
Yeah, go out there and achieve your own strategic victories.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.